Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Welcome to English grade 11. Students, today we are going to cover another SLO of unit number 3. Yes, this is our lecture number 5 and today we are supposed to learn these two SLOs regarding our fiction. Let's read them. First one is evaluate stages of plot development in a fictional text. We will learn what is a plot and what are these different stages according to which we develop our plot in any story. And these are the plot development stages. First, we have exposition, then setting, climax, character development, and resolution. But we are only going to go for our stages of plot. Now, the next one is where we critique or critically analyze the plot development with respect to different aspects of the story. Yes. Now, the whole lesson today is going to be on fiction. We know that fiction is a kind of literature where everything is imagined, it's fictionalized, it's fictitious, right? So, brace yourselves for today's lesson. You're going to learn something new. We are going to understand that what makes a story a story. What are the things that when we include them together, put them together, then we call it a story. And what is the difference between story and a plot? Are these two things related? Think about it, students, so that we can begin our lesson. Yes, we need to learn the difference between plot and story, how they are made, and the different stages of plot. Now, let's see what is a plot. A plot is the sequence of events within a story. It means that the major thing is a story, and then we put the sequence together in a very logical order, in a sequence of all these events that we have in a story. And this is what we call a plot. It has a description of what happens and why it happens. When we find answers of it or when we analyze it, we need to answer these questions. What happens in the story and what are the events leading up to that different events? So we are also going to answer why it happens. So when you combine these questions together, you can see that you are talking about a plot. A story is a comprehensive narrative. Yes, the whole narrative is what we call a story. But in that story, the way you present it with sequence of different events, then we make it a plot. Plot is a part of the story, but a story also includes different elements like there is a setting, characters, theme or themes, and other factors that influence how the events or plot are told. We know that a story has different elements. There's a theme, there's a conflict in the story, which is the main problem. Different characters are there, and there's also a solution of the story. But apart from this, when we are telling the story, we talk about the plot where we have different stages. This is what we are going to learn. Here you can see this mountain, this diagram. Now, at the start, dear learners, every story has a beginning. It is what we call exposition because the readers are being exposed to all the different characters, the opening of the story, the setting is established, and the theme is also established in this part. Then we have our action. And what kind of action is it? As you can see, it is rising to the middle of the story where we have our climax, the most interesting point of the story where everything is now wanting an answer. Then another action happens, as you can see. We call it the falling action because the action is falling towards the ending where all the problems, the conflict will be resolved somehow with very good logic, and this is what plot development. This is how all these different stages, when they are put together in an order, you can see that exposition, rising action, middle, or you can call it climax, falling action, and the end. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stages of plot. Now, let's go through all these different stages one by one. First, we have the start, the beginning of the story. This is what we call an exposition. So here, the story begins. It is the beginning of the story where the author introduces the setting. Setting includes the year, the whole. You can set the century, the environment, the surrounding, and the year, the month, or also the time. So this is where you are introduced to all these elements of a story. Characters are also part of the exposition because you are introduced to different characters with their characteristics or traits and other important information the readers need to know or the readers want to know. So at the very start, with a very few pages, maybe 1 or 2, you will be exposed to all these different things that are mentioned over here, and this will be our stage number 1. Now, next one, we have action. We know that story demands an action because if there's no action, then there is no story. So the action is going to rise towards the middle. This is how we portray it. Now, what is the rising action? A series of events. See, a series of events. There can be one event, more than one event, or more than 2 events that builds from the beginning of the story. Rising action is where the author builds interest and tension in the story. And tension will be created because there will be a conflict. So another story element is introduced over here, and you can introduce your events, one thing, then other thing happening. All of them are moving to the middle or the climax of the story, which is very much important. So you have all these events and your interest will be peaked over here at this point of time. If you're reading a good story, then the rising action keeps the story intact and the readers involved in the story. Now, the next one is our climax, because with the rising action, we are moving towards the climax, and this is also called turning point of the story. This is the highest point of tension because the rising actions, they are leading to a tension or action in the story. The climax often leads the reader to wonder what will happen. What will happen now? The interest is intact of the reader. How is everything going to turn out? The climax is an important turning point for the characters or the story. Now, if you recall different stories like The Lion King or different comic book stories and so many other novels like To Kill a Mockingbird, in every kind of story, no matter if it's a novel, a short novel, or a short story, you can find all these elements in a plot, all these different stages in your plot, and including the different story elements, like there will be a theme, there will be a setting, different characters, whether they are good or bad, or the characters are neutral or supporting characters. Then you have solutions, problems, and all that. So all the story elements with the stages of plot, they are moving together to give you a very interesting story. So next time when you are asked to read a story and analyze it, you will focus on these 5 stages, this mountain of diagram that we have over here, and analyze the story accordingly. Next, after the climax, the turning point, we will be having another action, a very important action, but it is falling action. This is falling towards the end. Now, the events of the story after the climax or the turning point, this is what we call a falling action, because the peak point was climax. Now we are moving towards the end. The events are leading to the end of the story and the resolution. We are moving to the resolution. Resolution means the solution of the different conflicts and different problems that we have. Maybe there is a problem between good character, the protagonist, or the main characters with the bad forces or the bad character, which we call antagonist. Now, an antagonist can be anyone. It can be a difficult situation, a creature, a human being, and so on. Now, at the last stage, which we call resolution, we are moving towards the solution. This is what we can also call denouncement, because it is moving towards the denouncement of the story. This is the final outcome or the untangling of the events of the story, because at the climax the story is pretty much tangled and you need answers. How things are happening, why they are happening, why a certain character is doing this, and why there are different situations. Now you have to untangle them one by one, and then you will move to the solution or the resolution of the story. So this is also like every and each of these different stages. This is also a very important stage, and you can judge the story critically and analytically using all these different stages. Now, here how it looks. You have to memorize this by heart. This is how the stages of plot are actually shown, and this is how they are working together in a very good sequence. Now we want to critically see the plot development, the different stages of a plot. How are we going to see? There are some steps that we need to follow. We will be talking about it. So critiquing the development of a plot, whether it's a novel, film, or any narrative form, any story form, this involves evaluating how well the story unfolds, engages the audience, and resolves problems or conflicts. Now, first, as you know, in the exposition, the introduction and setup, we need to critically see that how the story was introduced, how different setup was introduced. So we evaluate how effectively the story established the setting, characters, and initial conflicts. And if it is confusing, if the story is unable to do it efficiently, then we can say that the story's plot is very weak, because at the very start, at the very exposition, the beginning of the story, the writer or the author failed to prove the point and introduce all these elements in a story. Then after this, we will be talking about character development. We are going to assess whether characters' actions are consistent with their established traits and motivations. So at the very start, all the characters, like the protagonist, the antagonist, all of them are introduced, but we are going to analyze each character. Let's say if a story has 6 characters, then we are going to label them, their actions, their motivations, their different missions and purposes in the story. And you have to analyze each and every character. Even the supporting characters are very much important. So you are going to see that, is the character fully developed? What kind of character is it? Is it a flat character, round character, and so on? So there are different types of characterization. This is where you're going to analyze them accordingly. Next one, as we know that if there is no conflict, then there will be no story. So we will be analyzing the conflict and also the rising action. We evaluate the progression of conflict throughout the story. Look for obstacles and challenges that characters face on their journey toward resolving the central conflict. Are they consistent? Are they actually are they changing from protagonist to antagonist? Or if there's a flat character, is it working well? If there's a round character, is it developing or not? Next one, we will be seeing clarity and coherence. Coherence is what we call unity, where everything is connected with everything. We have to assess the clarity and coherence of the plot. Pay attention to the cause and effect relationship between events. What cause is leading to what effect, and vice versa. The cause and effect relationship is also very much important. We are going to see different we are going to analyze and clarify everything when we are evaluating a story. Why are we learning this SLO? Because when we are reading fiction, we want to critically analyze it. And for the analysis, we need some understanding and tools. So we are learning these stages and elements so that we can answer accordingly and also analyze our story in a very academic and in a very literary way. Next, we will be analyzing critically and critiquing climax and resolution of the story. We will evaluate the climax of the story. Is it really interesting? Are things tangling towards with one another? Does it deliver a satisfying payoff to the build-up of tension? Consider whether the resolution revolves the central conflict in a way that feels earned and meaningful. If the climax of the story is not interesting and the readers are not intact, then we can say that this part of the plot is very much weak. Not only climax, but we will also talk about resolution. How was the ending of the story? Is it logical? Is it full of ambiguities or problems, or is it the best solution or the best resolution that the story can lead up to? Then we will analyze themes and symbolism in the story, thematic elements, symbols presented in the plot, how effectively are they integrated to the story. We are going to see that, and we are going to critically talk about theme. There can be one, there can be many themes in a story, so we have to quickly find them out and analyze them, that what they are about. Are they interconnected, or just out of the blue they are put together? Now, we will see whether the story is original. Is it having originality, and is it creative or just bland? We assess the originality and creativity of the plot, consider whether the plot surprises or challenges audience expectations in satisfying way. If the build-up is very much original and interesting, then it has to be consistent at the end. We will see how the audience is engaged with the story, how engaging the plot is for its intended audience. If the story is written for kids, then it should be specifically for kids. If it is written for adults, then all the things should have equal coherence in doing so. So we cannot shift from a kid's story or a children's story to an adult or 30 plus or 40 plus morals or stories which the kids are not yet ready for. So it has to be very much consistent. This is how, by using all these different techniques and different steps, we can clearly critique any kind of plot of any fictional text. Students, at the end, a worksheet is attached over here. You can find it in the resources and in the description of the video. So here is a story, The Breakaway. You have to read it, and then at the next part of the worksheet, the next page, you have to answer some critical questions about the theme, characters, plot, and so on. So this way you can put your knowledge and learned concept into practice. Thank you, students, for listening. Now, we have a question bank and a worksheet attached for your better understanding. You can perform it then you can say that we have understood the learning outcome. So again, this was about understanding what a plot is, how it is different than a story. The story includes the plot, and the plot is actually a sequence of events organized. And we saw that there are different stages of a plot and how we can analyze them and critique them accordingly. Students, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you have great time learning about it. By solving the resources, you can easily fulfill your learning outcome and practice it. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video lesson with another SLO. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz.